I drove home in a trance. I left the car in the driveway and walked zombie-like toward the front door. Eventually, I managed to unlock it. I sat down on the couch. My love for Linda and my hatred for her swirled around in my head until they merged into a dark mass of pain. I found myself whimpering as I sat on the floor. I had no idea how I got there. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of darkness had descended upon me, enveloping me. I had been prone to gloomy moods before, but they paled in comparison to this. I had always managed to escape the darkness before. Once, a long time ago, I had to take my medication. I was going up the stairs. I was coming down the same stairs. I was wearing sweatpants and sneakers. I opened the door and started running. I had no idea what time it was or where I was. I was just running. My head started to clear from the effort. I stopped. I saw dawn breaking in the sky. There was no moon that night, which suited my mood. But now there was at least a hint that the sun would soon rise. I looked up to see where I was. There was a freeway nearby, and I saw an exit sign. It seemed like I had run almost 12 miles. I turned around and ran back. As I ran, jogged toward home, my gloomy mood lifted a little. Images of the previous night flashed through my mind. They were interspersed with images of life before Linda had left me, our family, our wedding, sex in our bed, our children, just flashes. When all of these things happened, I found myself back on my street. I saw my car in the driveway. I looked at our house. The door was wide open. I stopped in the front yard. Our neighbor, Mr. Smiley, came out. He was up early, and it was just getting to be dawn. "Jim, you're all right. Did something happen?" "Oh," I said in a voice that must have sounded robotic. "I'll be fine. I just needed a run." I stepped into the house. Mr. Smiley followed me to the door. He looked at me, standing in the living room. "Are you going to be okay? Where's Linda?" "Linda is with me right now, but I'll take care of it, thanks." He turned and walked away. I closed the door. I sat down on the couch in the living room. I looked at the clock. It was 8:08 in the morning. I slowly walked up the stairs, took off my clothes, and went into the shower. At least when I looked at myself again, I was naked and wet, standing in our bedroom dripping. I grabbed a towel and wiped myself off. I put on my thermal underwear, another sweatshirt, and my boots. I went downstairs thinking to run some more, but I could barely stand. The flashes of our lives began again, and the darkness returned worse than before. I screamed and screamed. Then, for some reason, I stopped screaming. I could no longer stand. I walked up the stairs, went to my gun safe. I pulled out the only weapon I had, a .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. I found myself sitting on the couch again with the gun in my hand. I couldn't remember how I got there. I checked the gun by flipping the slide. The cartridge had been ejected, and I saw that the clip was in place. I knew what I had to do. I put the gun to my head. I looked at my watch to see what time I would die. It was 11:30. I tried to pull the trigger. Nothing happened. I looked at the gun. I wasn't very good with guns. I got this one from my father, for protection. Of course it was. The safety was on. I fiddled with it. Then I thought I might mess up the living room. The kids were supposed to live here. It wouldn't be fair to them if I did it in the house. I walked out onto the porch and sat down on a yard chair that stood near the entrance. I put the gun to my head again, shivering. Mr. Smiley, who lived across the street, started yelling, "No, no, no, Jim, no!" I looked at him. He was mad. He started running toward me, but he was already old. I saw him stumble and fall. I put the gun to his head. Just as Mr. Smiley fell, a fancy sports car pulled up to the curb. Asshole got out. Bad timing. I looked at him. He was walking around the car. He didn't seem to notice me. I started running toward the car. He opened the door and Linda got out. By then, I had already walked to the car. They both turned around and looked at me. I held the gun to my head. I remember their faces when they saw me. Linda started screaming, her mouth folded into an O. The asshole just stared at it. He took a step toward me, raising his hand. He looked like he was going to grab me, like I was a ball player. I was seized with such an all-consuming rage that I felt like I was going to burn myself to death. I shot the asshole in the chest. He looked surprised and squawked. I ran on as he slowly fell onto the front of his car. He braced himself against it, and I looked down at him. I distinctly remember the look on his face when he looked up at me. His surprise had turned to horror. He looked up at me, gasping, with terror in his eyes. I blew his brains out onto the hood of his fancy sports car. There was a brief pause. I heard Linda's words, "Oh my God, oh Jesus, oh!" She was screaming. I looked right at her. I put the gun to her head. She stared at me in horror, frozen. Then I said one word to her, "Whore," and pulled the trigger. As I pulled the trigger, I felt myself being thrown aside and falling to the ground. It didn't occur to me at that moment that I shouldn't have perceived this. I heard screaming and roaring. I couldn't make out a single word. Then I heard sirens. I felt dizzy. I didn't understand why I was feeling anything. I was dead, but I wasn't. Mr. Smiley, as it turned out, grabbed me just as I was pulling the trigger. The gun went off. It blew a small part of my skull and most of my scalp. When I later looked at crime scene photos, there was so much blood around where I had fallen that I was amazed I had survived. But I had survived. I woke up in a hospital setting, at least I could tell that. There were lights flashing in the dim room. Some kind of machine was working. I couldn't move my legs. My arms and hands were numb, but at least partially mobile. I tried to speak, but there was something in my mouth. As I found out later, a tube. I began to thrash around, if you could call it that. Someone noticed. A nurse appeared. I saw the look in her eyes. Her face was blurry, but I could hear her gasping. She disappeared. This discouraged me, to say the least. I tried to scream again, but all I made was some strange sound. I began to fade away. A man appeared above me. He was smiling. He said, Jim, you're in the hospital. You're going to be okay. Stay with me." I disappeared. I came back, more alert. Nurses and doctors came and went. I would disappear, then come back. Each time I seemed to become a little more alert and aware. I began to remember what had happened. They took the tube out of my throat. It was painful. I started having a coughing fit and passed out. I came to my senses. There was a nurse looking at me. At least I thought it was a nurse. There was also a guy coming in. He said he was a doctor and, "Jim, you've been shot. You have a gunshot wound to the head, but the wound was not penetrating. You suffered a severe concussion and damage to your skull. We repaired those injuries as best we could. You've been unconscious for 4 days. We didn't expect you to wake up so soon. It's important that you remain immobile and unhurt. That's why we've strapped your legs down. Do you understand?" I nodded. I tried to speak, but my throat was very sore. He said, "You don't need to talk now. Soon you will be able to do it." Some time passed, and I came to my senses more and more. I remembered what had happened piecemeal. I remembered Linda's screams. I remembered her betrayal and blatant treachery. I sank back into the darkness that was with me afterward. But then I remembered Asshole's face before I killed him, and the darkness receded. I began to smile. I remembered Linda's screams and her look at me as I put the gun to my head, the "oh" when she first saw me with a gun. I started laughing. I kept laughing. The nurse came to look at me. I saw her worried face as I continued to laugh. I was sure that no matter how wonderful sex with Asshole was, Linda would never be able to remember it fondly. Okay, bitch. I knew that the last moments of Asshole's life were filled with terrible fear. A real fear of his own death. He deserved nothing better than what he got. Linda? I found myself hating her with a passion equal to the love I had felt for her before. I wished I had killed her too. I could only think that it was the children that kept me from doing so. But upon reflection, I realized that the thought of killing her had not crossed my mind when I had the gun and the opportunity. But now it did. My parents came to see me. I'd been in the ICU for 2 weeks. I was supposed to be moved to another room. Of course, I was arrested, but the authorities allowed my parents to visit me. My mom went in first. "My boy, oh my boy, what has she done to you?" She leaned over and kissed my cheek. Over her shoulder, I saw my father. He patted my arm. "We found you a lawyer, Jim. I'll arrange for you to meet her. Her name is Margie Kinder. She'll be here tomorrow when you go to the other floor. How are you feeling?" "I'm much better. I was told the wound had healed and the concussion had eased. But it hasn't gone away. But I can talk and may be able to get out of bed soon. Where are the children?" "We have them for now. They're at school. They want to see you." "Why aren't they with Linda?" Mom replied, "Linda was hurt badly by what happened. She's been in an institution. They say she doesn't talk much. We talk to her family, but we haven't visited her. The next 2 weeks were spent recovering my physical abilities. I did physical therapy. When my aides and I were in the recovery room, we always had a police officer with us. The kids came to see me twice. At first, they were frightened by the bandage on their heads, but after a few minutes, they seemed to return to normal and talked about their school and sports. I was happy to see them. I was interested in their future. The attorney and I had several meetings in a private room next to the rehab unit. She was witty. I told her everything I remembered up to a certain point. That point came when I decided to shoot myself in front of Asshole and Linda. I told her I had absolutely no memory of shooting myself. The next memory was waking up in the hospital. She told me I would be questioned by a court-appointed psychiatrist and someone she had hired, with court funds. She told me that I was charged with second-degree murder with a weapon. I could face up to 60 years on that charge. She said there was no doubt in my mind that I shot and killed Asshole. She asked me not to call him that. She said it didn't make a good impression. I decided that in court, I would call him that guy. Or maybe the dead guy. She didn't like the mention of dead guy. I took medication for my black moods. They lessened, but they didn't go away. I worked hard to regain my physical abilities. And surprisingly, I was making good progress. I could walk and sometimes jog with ease. I was also getting stronger. I appeared in court remotely from the hospital. I was placed in custody without bail pending a psychological evaluation. I pleaded not guilty. I was charged with several counts, the most serious of which was murder with a weapon. Second degree. The doctors I was treated by knew that when I was released, I could go straight to jail. They decided to keep me a little longer than usual. I continued to train hard. Now I was lifting weights and doing aerobics. I saw a psychiatrist. He ran me through a whole battery of tests, answering questions that seemed completely unimportant. However, I was very attentive. At times, as I answered, he would pause and look at me. I would change my answer when he did so. This didn't happen very often. I spent a total of 5 hours with him over 2 days. I was then discharged from the hospital and transferred to the custody of a psychiatric hospital with a locked ward. There was also a gym there, and I used it very often. My cellmates didn't seem too interested in it. It was a strange crew of about 15 people. Some of them were learning how the court worked. Some were being evaluated or awaiting trial. Some were zombies. A state psychiatrist came in and ran me through a series of tests. I realize now that she was testing to see if I was malignizing. That is what the tests were trying to determine. The questions were designed to see if I was lying in an attempt to make my case look good. The tests were very similar to the ones I took at my doctor's office, so I gave the same answers. Sometimes those answers were not completely accurate. I was in this facility for 3 weeks. My family visited me, but not my children. I asked about Linda. She was with her parents now, but she wasn't feeling well. She was being treated. She saw the kids once and it didn't go well. I was told that her even tone scared them. I stopped taking the medication. The black moods came up sometimes, but I dealt with them. My attorney found me not guilty by reason of insanity. She said the following: I had a mental defect, depression so severe it was like psychosis. This mental defect, as far as the law was concerned, prevented me from realizing the wrongfulness of my conduct or bringing my conduct into conformity with the law. It was on the latter that she was going to stop. I was unable to stop myself when confronted by the asshole and my wife. My psychiatrist's report supported my position. The government psychiatrist's report was ambiguous as to whether I was faking. A trial was held. It was admitted at trial that I shot and killed Mark. It was recorded on surveillance video, almost all of it. Mr. Smiley testified. He told how worried he was when he saw me coming back from a run and earlier when he saw the open door. He almost called the police after our first interaction. He then told how I put a gun to his head while standing on the porch and he screamed, ran to me, fell down and got up. He saw me shoot the soccer player, his words, and then point the gun at myself. He got up and grabbed me, but the gun went off and I fell to the ground unconscious. He thought I was dead. Mr. Smiley's cross-examination was brief. He was clearly telling the truth. I took the floor and recounted what had happened up to the point where I decided to shoot myself in front of them. I then said that I had no memory of what had happened until I was in the hospital. There was nothing to counter this. The state psychiatrist testified that the tests she administered to me did not conclusively reveal mankind. My psychiatrist said I had been so deeply depressed by the events of the previous evening that I had become psychotic, suicidal, and I couldn't stop myself from seeing the people who had put me in that state. It was clear that after killing Mark, I had tried to kill myself. I was acquitted after only an hour of jury deliberation. After that, I was placed in a psychiatric hospital, but not the one where I was locked up. I had to prove that I had regained my sanity and my ability to control myself. It didn't take long. The experts confirmed that my depression could be controlled with medication if necessary. In their opinion, I was not a danger to myself or others. The judge agreed, and I became a free man. January of the following year. My children and parents greeted me as I left the institution. I went to live with my parents for the time being. Linda regained custody of the children and returned to the house. She was also on medication. She was able to go back to work, but she needed help with the children, and both parents provided it. I have not seen her or spoken to her since the night of the shooting. Of course, my case got a lot of publicity. When Linda returned to the house, she was harassed by the media. After the trial, things calmed down a little bit. But now that it's been reported that I'm being released, the story is hot again. Just another problem among many. Linda didn't file for divorce or do anything about child custody. A week later, they came to my parents' house for the day. Linda didn't show up. I had an amazing time with them. It was a Saturday, and we spent the entire day with them until just before bedtime when they came home. I decided that Linda and I should get together and talk about everything that had happened to try to figure out how we should proceed. I wrote her a note to that effect and asked my father to deliver it. Linda agreed that we needed to talk. The meeting was set for 10 days at her parents' house. I had to decide how to approach this and what I wanted. I decided that I wanted to understand what she had done. I also needed to understand what she wanted in the future. I wanted a relationship with my children, of course, but I was not at all sure if I wanted anything to do with Linda or, for that matter, if she wanted anything to do with me, the murderer of her lover. Before the meeting, I was in a complete state of distress, but I didn't go back on my meds. And as it turned out, the black mood didn't return despite the stress. I got myself in great shape and started working for myself every now and then to get some money. I felt capable of standing on my own 2 feet. I just wondered if seeing Linda would set me back. I rang the doorbell at her parents' house at 10 o'clock Saturday morning. Her father answered and led me into the living room. He left, and Linda entered the room. I stood up, crossing the room. We stared at each other. She seemed gaunt. She had a hunted look. I figured I couldn't have appeared that way to her. To be honest, I was more physically fit than I used to be, but not at the level of a soccer player. I said, "Hi." "Hi, how are you?" she replied softly. "Much better than, well." I was so nervous, I could see she was nervous too. "I'm sorry I didn't come to you sooner," she said. "I was out of commission for a while, and then they told me it might hurt your defense." "That's all right. I'm sorry about the way things turned out. I'm sorry I snapped like that. I just couldn't accept what happened. It was so awful and unexpected. I burst into tears. I couldn't say anything else. She came over to me and put her arms around me. She said, "I'm so sorry for what I did. You called me a whore before you shot yourself. And I knew you were right. I've been thinking a lot about why it happened, and I can't tell you. That guy just took me by storm. Well, I just wish I could maybe go see someone with you to talk about this whole episode. I've been to a counselor, have you?" She smiled sadly. "It didn't help much. I was traumatized, of course. It was so scary. For a while, I couldn't stop imagining it. I have it under control now, but I can still summon it if I want to. Crazy. I'm the crazy one." We broke the embrace and just stood, talking next to each other. She asked, "Have you thought about what you want to do? About family and us?" "Yes. Have you?" "Of course, but I needed your advice, and I needed to see you and see how I'd react. I have to say, I really hated you, for a while, but no more than that. And yet I'd still have some problems. You know, with resuming, because I don't ever want to have those feelings again. Ever." "Does that mean it's over between us?" If I even want you back? I want to, I think, but I don't know how. You can't just move back in. But the kids need you. Maybe we should get counseling and share time with the kids. So that's what we did. From that first meeting, I realized that I no longer hated Linda. But I also discovered that I had no desire to be around her and no love for her. All of that was gone. The hate was gone, and with it, the love. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment and started working for myself full-time. Our counseling sessions never started. Linda seemed eager to reconnect. I didn't. And eventually I made that clear to her. It was in the 4th session and Linda sobbed after my words. I told her, as I had before, that the risk to me from intimacy with her was too great. 18 months before, she had almost killed me. She had no explanation for why she'd gone off with that asshole other than she needed sex. And that wasn't enough to try to be a family again. And even though I didn't say it, I knew that if we got back together and she did it again, one of us would die, or both of us. We divorced and she stayed in the house. I worked a good job, made some money, and bought a house nearby so the kids could visit her. They had their own rooms. It was all so hard on the children. The taunts at school, the questions about why we did what we did. Eventually, things settled down for the most part. There was some reluctance felt by each of them to socialize with members of the opposite sex, but that passed. Linda never remarried. I heard that she dated men. She did, but I didn't care. If she had tried to put someone in the house, I might have fussed. But that didn't happen, and now they're off to college. I also never got married. I found that I couldn't trust anyone, no woman, and if you don't count the kids and my parents, no one at all. True, I did sort of accidentally strike up a long-term relationship with a young woman, Kelly Smith, who was a single mom with a 10-year-old son. She and I were clear from the beginning that we needed some good times and maybe a little close contact and hugs now and then. I also liked her son and did my best to help him. Other than that, I had acquaintances with women, mostly from my gym. My experiences made me build muscle and get fitter. They liked that, some of them. Some of the women knew I was charged with murder. Most didn't. Of the ones who did know, 2 were very turned on by it. I took advantage of it, but I wasn't comfortable with it, so I got away from them. Now my life is not lonely, but it's nowhere near what it was before Linda broke my heart. One night ruined us. We had a happy family. One night ruined it. The only consolation is that the asshole didn't survive to create more destruction. When I got really sick, I always replayed the last moments of his life in my head. It helped.